Beautiful people, welcome to Remy's Fashion. My name is Remy. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to draft a mermaid skirt pattern. If this is something you are interested in, then keep watching. The measurements you will need are on the screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw out my starting point. And this, my starting point, is going to be my waistline. And from here, I'm going to measure out all my vertical measurements. That's from my waist to my hip, from my waist to my knee, and from my waist to the skirt length. So this mermaid skirt, it's a part of a dress. So because of that, I'm not going to be doing any waist shaping. So I'm just going to draft it out as it is. If you want to use it as a skirt, you can just now create a band for it and then add it to the top of the skirt. So now from my waist to my hip, my measurement is 10 inches. I'll measure and I'll mark. From my waist to my knee, my measurement is 22 inches. I'll measure and I'll mark. And I want the length of my skirt to be 42 inches. So I'm just going to take my measurement from my waistline. I'll measure 42 inches down and I'll mark. And then I'm going to draw a horizontal line to connect my points. I will now label them. So the next thing I'm going to do is to plot my circumference measurements. So my waist circumference measurement is 38 inches. By the time I divide that by 4, it's going to give me 9.5 inches. So I'm going to be adding 1 inch that, and that's going to give me 10.5 inches. I'll measure and I'll mark. My hip circumference measurement is 47 inches. Divided by 4 is going to give me 11.75 inches. So on my hip line, I'll measure 11.75 and I will mark. Then on the knee line, if you have your circumference measurement, go ahead and plot it in. But if you don't, all you need to do is take your hip circumference measurement, subtract 1 inch or 1.5, and then plot it on your knee line. So mine, I'm going to be taking 1.5 inch away from 11.75 inches. And by the time I do that, it's going to give me 10.25. That's 10 inches, 0.25. I'm going to measure on my knee line and I will mark. I'll bring that same measurement. I'm going to plot it on my skirt length. So the next thing I need to do now is I'm going to connect my points. I'm going to connect from my waistline to my hip line. And then from my hip line to my knee. And then from my knee line, I'm going to connect all the way to my skirt length. Like this. So after doing this, the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to draft out my darts. So half of your nipple to nipple measurement, that's what you're going to be plotting on the waistline. So mine is 4.5 inches. I'll measure. And I want the length of my dart to be 5 inches. So I'm just going to measure 5 inches and I'll mark. And then just to be sure that that 5 inches is on my 4.5 inch, that's my nipple to nipple measurement. Once I've done that, I'll connect with a straight line. And then I'm going to open up my dart by 1 inch. Remember, we left an allowance of 1 inch for our dart. So that's half an inch on each side. And that's a total of 1 inch. So I will now draw out my dart legs. So this is my dart. So like I said, this mermaid skirt is part of a dress. So I'm not going to be doing any waist shaping for this skirt. So this side is my center front. So just make sure you label so that you don't forget. And this is my side front. So I'm going to have my labels like that. The next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut out this pattern. And I will use this pattern to draft my back pattern. And I'm going to write front pattern. So this is the pattern I'm going to be using to modify my mermaid skirt. Before I slash and spread, I'm going to use this pattern to draft out my back pattern. I'll bring in another pattern paper. I'll place this on it, and then I'm going to be leaving space on this side. So I'm going to be measuring out my zipper allowance on this side. So I'm going to pin it down. So this is my waistline. I'm just going to extend it outwards. So that's my waistline. I will extend the hip line as well, the knee line and the length line. So for the zipper allowance on the waistline, I'm going to measure 1 inch outwards. 1 inch outwards. And then on the hip line, I'm going to be measuring 1.5 inch. The reason why I'm doing that is I want extra space at the hip line at the back so that my skirt will have a very good fit. So I'm going to measure 1.5 inch. That puts me here. And then on the knee line, I will measure 1 inch. On the length line, that's the skirt length, I'm also going to be measuring 1 inch. And then I'm going to connect my points. I will connect from the waist to the hip. And then from the hip to the knee. And then from the knee, I'm going to measure all the way to the skirt length. So after drawing this, so because I want to draw out my zipper allowance, I'm going to measure, this is 1 inch. So I'll put it in here. So I'm going to connect the 1 inch. This is 1 inch. I'll put it here. And then I'm going to connect from the 1 inch. This is the space, the extra space for our bum. Then just make sure you have up to 1 inch. So here. So I'll connect. And then I'll connect all the way down to the hem. So this is my zipper allowance. I'm just going to write zipper allowance. So that's my zipper allowance. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out my dart. This is my dart. This is the point where my dart is going to be. So before I draw out the dart, I'm going to cut out this pattern and then I can connect all the lines. So this is going to give me my back pattern. So now I'm going to make sure I draw out my horizontal lines. So I'll take out my front pattern now. So this is my back pattern. I'm going to draw out my lines, make them visible. This is where I'm going to be plotting in my dart. So you can confirm 4.5 because that's my nipple to nipple measurement. That's there. And then the length of the dart for the back, I want to have a length of 6 inches. So I'll mark 6 inches there. Then I'll just make sure that 4.5 is on that 6 is here. And then I'll connect. And then I'm going to open up my dart by ½ an inch on each side because it's a 1 inch dart that I left. I'll now draw out my dart legs. So this is my back pattern. So I'm just going to write back pattern because this is a basic pattern. This is what I'm going to be modifying to a man-made skirt. So I'm just going to write back skirt pattern. So that's my back skirt pattern. So this is my hip line, my knee line, and then the length of my skirt, and this is my waistline. So together we have our patterns, both the front and the back, okay? And then make sure you label as well. This is my center front, this is my side front, and this is my center back, and this is my side back. So these are the patterns that I'm going to be using. I'm going to be slashing and spreading them to create our mermaid skirt, both for the front and the back. I'm going to be starting with the front. I want my flare to be 1.5 inch above my knee. I don't want my flare to start from my knee line. So you can decide you want yours to be above it by 1 inch or 1.5. Because if your flare is on top of your knee, it's difficult to walk. It's more comfortable when it's above. So I'm going to use 1.5 inch. I'm going to measure 1.5 inch upwards. And then I'm going to connect and create our new knee line. So after doing that, the next thing I need to do now is this new knee line. I'm going to measure half of that knee line and I will mark the middle of it because I want to slash and spread the bottom half of this pattern. This is the easiest way to divide your pattern into two. I'll mark the middle and then I will do the same thing down here. And then I'm going to connect them together. So after doing this, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slash this pattern. So this is my center front. So this is my side front. So don't forget that. I'm slashing it up to the new knee line. And then I'm going to slash the side open, not the center front. I'm leaving the center front as it is. I'm slashing the side open. Cut it and just leave a bit so that you can move your pattern. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take another pattern paper and put underneath this pattern to be able to create my mermaid skirt. So I have taken another pattern paper and I have placed my pattern on top. So I'm going to sellotape it down so that it does not move. So for the center front, this one on the center front, I'm not going to move it. I'll just leave it as it is. We're not going to be moving it. We're not spreading it. We're just leaving it like that. And then you decide how wide you want to move your spread. Decide how wide you want it. So you decide. I'm going to be using 10 inches. So I'm just going to measure 10 inches. You can decide you want it less or you want it more, depending on how full you want your skirt to be. So I'm going to be opening up to 10 inches. So this is my 10 inches. Then I'm going to sellotape it so to make sure that it stays down. Okay, so after doing that, just make sure what you want your pattern to be open by is correct. So mine is correct. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to measure from here. So I want to take the measurement of what this is. So that's 23.5. That's what I have. So that's what I'm going to measure all around. So I'll measure 23.5. So whatever you have for yours is what you're going to be using so that you can have a curve. Okay. So I'm going to connect using my curve roller. So this is my curve for my mermaid skirt. So just make sure what you measured is correct. So this is it for the front. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to cut out. So this is my mermaid skirt for my front. You're going to be cutting on fold. This is going to be on fold. So just indicate on fold so that when you take this pattern, you know exactly what you're supposed to do. So I'm going to be writing mermaid skirt. So this is my front mermaid skirt pattern. So the next thing we're going to do is to modify the back. So this is my back pattern. So I'm going to be modifying this back pattern to give me a mermaid skirt pattern for the back. And for the back, I'm going to be having an extra flare at the bottom. That's an extra tail. It's going to have an extra tail on the center back. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to work on the knee line first. Just like I did for the front pattern, I'm going to go up by 1.5 inch. And then I'll draw a straight line to connect. So this is my new knee line. And then I'm going to take the middle of this line, the midpoint. So find out what your midpoint is. Just like I said, measure it. This is the easiest way to get the midpoint. You measure the line, fold your tape into two, and then mark. I'll do the same thing for the length line. And then I took my measurement from the zipper. Don't include the zip, just after the zipper line. And then I'm going to connect. So So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to slash and spread on both sides. So I'm going to slash up to the knee line. And then I'll slash to the side back, and then I'll also slash to the center back. Then I'm going to bring in another pattern paper, fold it into two like this so that you can have a midpoint. So I have a midpoint there, and then I'm going to place my pattern on it like this. I'll make sure it's placed in the middle of where I folded. See this middle? I'm going to draw out that line so that you can see it clearly. So just fold your new pattern paper into two and get a midpoint. And then I'm going to place this pattern on it. See? So by the time I cover this up, you see? So this is the midpoint. See, by the time I cover it, I place this pattern on it. You see? So that's the midpoint. So I'll open it up and secure here with my tape. So after pinning it down, so the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to measure, because I've been spreading using 10 inches. I'm going to measure 10 inches and I will mark. So I'm still going to spread using 10 inches. So this is my 10 inches here. Okay, so I'm just going to sellotape that down. So that's my 10 inches. So I'll tape it down. And then I'm going to take my measurement from the top here all the way down here. So whatever measurement you have, you mark. And then I'll use my curve to connect. Like this. After working on the side back, the next thing we're going to work on is the center back. For the center back, we're going to be having a cut together tail for the center back. So I want it to be longer. So I'm going to extend this down. So I'm going to add another pattern paper because I need to extend this down and then increase the width. Instead of using 10 inches, I can use more. You can decide whatever you want to do, depending on how full you want your mermaid skirt to be. So if you like the tail at the back to be very long, so you decide how long you want yours to be. So for me, I'm going to measure 4 inches down. So it's going to be a bit longer than my skirt. So I measure 4 inches down like this. And then I'm going to be opening it up by more. Usually I use 10 inches, but because I'm trying to create a tail that is attached to the center back, I'm going to be slashing it longer than that. I'm going to be using 14 inches. So I'm going to be spreading it up to 14 inches. So I'll open it up. So this is my 14 inches. So I'll spread it up to 14. So this is my 14. And then here now, I've extended it to 4 inches. So 4 inches here. So I'm going to bring this down. You can do less, you can do more. This is a personal preference, depending on how full and long you want the tail of your mermaid skirt to be. I like the fullness at the back. So I'm extending this by 4 inches. So 4 inches. So I'll draw it down. So this is my 4 inches. That's the all-together tail at the back. That's the attached tail. So 14. So I've opened it up by 14 inches. So I'm just going to secure my spread. This is a personal preference, just like I said. You decide how much tail you want at the back. I like my skirts with the flare. I like it really full. So this is going to be full, but you can even make it even more fuller than this. So that measurement you took on here, we're going to rotate that measurement. After drawing this out, I'm going to draw this out completely. That's 4 inches, which I added. So that's my extra. And then you remember the measurement we had on here. So you're going to connect it to meet this end. I'll now connect these points as well. And then I'm going to connect it to meet this end. So I connected it to meet this end. So this is a mermaid pattern for the back. The tail is attached, you see, because hair has gone down. So the next thing I need to do now is to cut out this pattern. So this is the back. See the mermaid skirt? See how the tail is on here? So this is the mermaid skirt for the back. See how beautiful that is? This is the front, this is the back. So these are my pattern pieces for both my front and back patterns. So this is the mermaid skirt. I did not add any sewing allowance all around the pattern. So when I'm transferring to fabric, I'm going to be adding my sewing allowances all around. So I'm going to make a note to myself, letting me know that I need to add sewing allowances around the patterns. If you enjoyed this tutorial, you will like this video on how I drafted 6 pieces skirt using slash and spread method. The video is right here in the description box below and on the cards above. With this, we have come to the end of this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Please give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you so much. I'll see you in my next tutorial. Take care and God bless.